As we should know by now, every statistic has its limitations, and the unemployment statistic is no exception to this rule. So we know the ABS calculates the unemployment statistic through the labour force survey. And this survey is designed to measure the unemployment rate in the country. So they pick a random 0.7% of the population and ask some questions pertaining to unemployment. So how many hours have you worked in the last week? Do you enjoy your job? Would you prefer to work more hours? And all this sort of questions relating to unemployment. So here lies one of the major limitations because of its lack of representativeness. It only surveys 0.7% of the population. So you can imagine Australia being this large circle here. This is 100% of the population, but all that the labour force is surveying is this little part here. So this little 0.7% part here. And see, all the rest of the unshaded part of the circle, that part of the population hasn't been surveyed. And so, because we are only surveying 0.7% of the population, this may cause some statistical bias that may result. So it may not be representative. And by this, we can see that possibly you could pick 0.7% of the population here who are all employed, and therefore the unemployment statistic would be 100%. But that would surely not represent the entire population, because out of luck or chance, you've picked 0.7% of the population who are actually unemployed. So this statistic may be unrepresentative of the entire population. And the way they counter this is they choose different socioeconomic backgrounds, and they try to make this as representative as possible by using different types of methods of measuring this statistic. But the underlying reality is that because we've only got the resources to measure 0.7% of the population, the statistic may not be representative. Now, secondly, we have a limitation of the arbitrariness. So the arbitrary of the definitions. So as we know, we can have, say, a 10-year-old who actually works on a family farm or for a family business, and technically he should be counted as an employed person. But however, the definition states that the person must be 15 years or over to be counted in the statistics for employment or unemployment. So the definitions used to classify a person as employed or unemployed are rather arbitrary or random. Who says the cutoff must be at, say, 15 years old? And who says you have to have worked for more than 1 hour in the past week to have been counted as someone who is employed? So why not say, instead of 1 hour, why not say 6 hours or 5 hours or even 10 hours? This would greatly distort the unemployment rate of the country if, say, 10 hours was the minimum. Say you have a casual job at university and you only work 5 hours a week. You're classified as employed currently, but what if the statistic increased to 10 hours a week? Then you will be classified, or most casual employees will be classified as unemployed also. So that's the arbitrariness of the definitions of unemployment and employment. That's another limitation to the unemployment, or the figure of unemployment. And also, lastly, we have misleading data, which may be a cause of underestimation or overestimation. So before we get too excited about the trend for unemployment or how we can use the unemployment figure to determine the economic growth rates, we need to look at the duration of work, how they're working, the likelihood they're going to keep their job satisfaction rates, and all these other different statistics or qualitative statistics or factors relating to one's work. So it is likely that many in part-time work really want to work full-time. And in many cases, some people want to move out of their jobs. But the unemployment statistic doesn't actually represent that. So the misleading data strongly pertains to or relates to this idea of underemployment. And there are very, very little measures to actually determine a very respectable or credible figure of underemployment, because it is so hard to measure, because it all comes back to this idea of subjectivity. So maybe sometimes if after you've had a child, you may want to work less. But maybe 2 months ago, when you hadn't had that child, you want to work more, so that once you have the your kid, then you can have a sound financial base to support your child. So this idea of underemployment fluctuates from time to time, and data may be misleading to the extent that the statistics fails to account for the changing working environment. So these are the three major limitations to the unemployment statistic. So firstly, the misrepresentation or the unrepresentativeness of the survey, which only accounts for 0.7% of the population. Now that's not a lot of people, considering Australia is around 25 million people in Australia. Also, the arbitrariness of the definitions, which may distort or alter the unemployment figure, should say the definition of being employed is changed from more than 1 hour a week. And also there may be misleading data. So this very much underlies the concept of underemployment and job satisfaction rates. So unemployment doesn't necessarily mean, or a low rates of unemployment doesn't necessarily mean the economy is functioning well and therefore material living standards have improved. Or because it fails to take into consideration the non-material living standards and also this idea of underemployment, where people wish to work more hours but they don't have the opportunity to, say, moving from a part-time job to a full-time job. So they're the limitations to the unemployment statistic.